Exciting. All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and kick things off. I think people will continue to join as we go. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to be talking about change management strategies, becoming change maker. I think there's always a lot of change, obviously. So navigating through change is a big thing that we talk about, and how people become resilient, sorry. And I think what we're going to focus on today is more how are we actually driving behavior change? So how are we getting people to behave differently within organizations, either new processes, new tools, new approaches to things, and really digging into that, less so on the resiliency side. I think today, well, let me just take a step back. I'll introduce our guests. I'll let them introduce themselves. I'm Barbara. I'm the founder and CEO at Pando. I'm very eager to get onto this topic, obviously. I will let Bryce, Anoop, and Melanie quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll jump in. Anoop, you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Barb. Hi everyone. My name's Anoop. I am a principal consultant at Biztree. We are a data consultancy in Europe. As you may have heard a few minutes ago, I'm based just outside London in the UK. Biztree, we're all over Europe there. So we've got in the Netherlands, in Germany, and in Belgium as well. And I mean, I'm really excited about this topic because one part of my role in Biztree is around helping people grow and reach their potential. And we've put in a lot of things recently to help people do that. But that always leads to some sort of change to help people get to that point, and we've helped them do those things. But yeah, it's not always been easy. It's not always been plain sailing. So I'm looking forward to diving into this topic with these guys here.
Bryce, you want to jump in?
Cool. Hi, I'm Bryce Keithley. I'm based in San Francisco, California. I am the Chief People Officer at a Series A startup called Ready.net. And I love this topic because, especially at growing companies, really everywhere, change is the constant. In startups, they say you grow or die. And so if you grow, you change. And so learning how to navigate, influence, and of course, stay resilient through the changes is key. So excited to chat with y'all.
Hey, I'll round it off. Hi, all. My name is Melanie Naranjo. I head up the people team at Athena. We're a compliance training company. Think harassment prevention, cybersecurity, and similar to everyone on this call, it's really interesting being talking about this particular topic with you all. I think from my perspective in particular, I will say for anyone who's never worked HR at an HR tech company, you got to do it. You got to experience it at some point in your life. It just forces you to be so extra incredibly thoughtful about HR processes, because you're not just thinking for your employees, you're thinking for the broader HR community as your company works to build HR communities, which is why, I talk so much on panels like these. So really, really cool getting to chat with other HR professionals on this call about a really important topic.
Well, thank you all. I think I've been a marketer for a marketing company, so it's definitely the same kind of approach. I became a much better marketer by helping other marketers understand like what the best practices are. And so I think from a people perspective, we're all doing the same thing. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're gonna kind of dive into how do we actually drive behavior changes. I think this is something that I've always been really passionate about. Coming from the marketing side, a lot of what you're doing as marketing and sales is kind of moving people down the funnel, and that's very similar to how we think about talent and also the employee experience. And I think that we're going to be talking about how do we actually set the stage for moving organizations from one point to the next point. Like, where are we at today and where are we trying to get to? And not just reacting, although a lot of that stuff does come from external factors that happen, pandemics, moving remotely when you were going to be a fully in-office company, all of those kinds of things. Or you're a small scrappy startup and now you're a bigger company, and how do the behaviors and the approaches and the things need to evolve, and how do we think about that? So when we talk about that and when we talk about driving those behavior changes, I want to start, and we're going to kind of start high level and then go into more tactical on this conversation. But I guess we'll kick off with just each of you kind of sharing what you think the biggest factor is for driving behavior change. So like moving people within an organization from one point to the next. So it's just one major factor. Melanie, we'll start with you. What do you think is kind of the main or the biggest factor to successfully driving org change?
I'm going to try and make it one, but it's kind of like a little two-parter. Okay, well, I'll make it brief, which is I think it's got to be easy to implement, but then you've also got to very quickly see results. If it's a thing that you can implement, but you can't quickly see those results, people aren't going to do it. If you've got the buy-in, but then it's really hard to implement, their heart's going to be in the right place, but no one's actually going to do it. So I think it's really got to be super easy to implement, super easy and quick to see the results.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that. Mine's a little bit different. I like that approach where it has to be easy. I agree. For me, another one of the biggest factors is around benefits. If you can sell the benefit to the people and it's going to be beneficial to them, I think they're much more likely to come on that journey with you to change. Like, what is that compelling event that's going to make them change? Something that's going to benefit them personally. And yeah, it's basically selling that benefit to them, and then they'll be able to come on board and say, yeah, I'm going to do this and really champion it as well. So yeah, benefits the key one for me.
I'd say mine is sort of related. People work can often feel ancillary, I think, to people in an organization. They're working on coding or they're working on selling and they're asked to write reviews or do something else. And so deeply understanding the organizational goals and priorities so that the behavior change you're recommending supports the advancement of the business. And so when you're recommending the change that sincerely supports the success of the business, you can much more easily align individuals for what's in it for them. This benefits you. This benefits all of us. We're all on the same team. I'm not trying to give you something more, something extra. We're looking to iterate on what you're doing for the benefit of the organization.
Yeah, I think those are all really good and all related. And I would probably add, just for the sake of throwing one into the hat, clarity and just like being really clear about what you're trying to achieve, and just simplicity in that. So I think like being easy and being able to see the results quickly, that being able to receive the results quickly is that benefit, Anoop, that you're talking about, and then having the right solution initially coming from understanding, and then I think like just clarity around what you're trying to achieve. Awesome. That all makes sense. So I guess go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to throw in something that I think that often goes unsaid, but probably should be made explicit here. I think, tying all of these together, I think sometimes people tend to silo things off to Bryce's point, and they look at people as a separate thing. And I think it's always important to remember, like, no matter what you're doing, whichever thing you're using to make this thing work, in my opinion, the people function exists to drive the business strategy forward. And so the people strategy should always be in service of the business strategy. And so if you're trying to drive forward a people initiative and it isn't directly contributing to a business goal that you have in place, it doesn't matter if you've got the buy-in, the benefit, the making it easy to implement. The problem is that you are almost functioning as if you've got your own company as opposed to aligning it with the existing company. So I would just say for anyone who's taking any of these tips, always make sure, first and foremost, though, is this helping drive forward the business strategy? Because if it's not, then you need to adjust your people strategy so that it does drive forward the business strategy.
That's a very common theme we've heard across several sessions already today. And I think it's important because obviously, like you said, where are you trying to get to and what is the impact of that? And I think it's for the people strategy, for any real thing that you're trying to accomplish within the organization. So where do we start? And I guess that depends on what initiative you're trying to implement. And we're going to talk through some examples that you guys have all like change management that you've driven and some examples of that. But I guess when you think about kind of where you start, Anoop, I know you were a trainer in the past. How has that helped? Like, what is your sort of approach to thinking about the implementation of a new process, initiative, or maybe a much bigger change? What's kind of the first step?
Yeah, so yeah, as you said, I've spent quite a lot of my career training other people, mainly in software, but I think there's a lot of synergies that go around helping people learn and grow into new processes. And again, it's that driving that change again, right? So I think it's individuals will learn it in different ways. If I go back to my training days, it's trying to hit the three main different ways that people learn. Like my wife's a primary school teacher, and she does the same thing as well. So you've got your audio learners, you've got your visual learners, and you've got your kinesthetic learners, the one that need to actually do to be able to learn as well. And trying to hit all three of those different areas when you're helping people along that journey to change, to make sure that everyone it's basically the change is accessible to everyone. You've got much more chance of success, right? So people are going to be able to come along that journey and understand what you're saying a lot better. So I think with my background in training, that's one thing that I've definitely learned, where I'll try and hit as many of those different areas as possible to bring people with me.
So when you're thinking about whatever the thing is, you're also thinking about, okay, how are we going to be presenting this, and how are we going to get it to resonate with people?
Definitely. So I mean, example, I'll use one of the reasons why we're here today, Pando. So we brought Pando into our business last year, and one of the things that we did was think about how people can actually get that bought into the process that we're doing. And we used visual aids, like using Miro boards so that people can see visually how we're going to bring everything together. We made sure that we had sessions where we were talking through everything. So again, we got the audio thing, but then we're like, all right, now go and do it, go and have a go, try it, learn, and then come back to us with your feedback. And that loop means that we're hitting all the three different areas. And as well, giving them the opportunity for feedback and coming back to us with that, you're giving them some ownership over the change as well, which is something that they'd never had before at our business. So yeah, giving them that ownership and hitting all those different areas definitely has helped us.
Yeah. Melanie, what are your thoughts on this?
In terms of like how to effectively drive change, right? And like, how do we start?
Yeah, like where do you start? Like if you have an initiative or I don't know, a new process, how do you get
Yeah.
rolling?
I think one of the things that I learned early on in my career, and I'm just going to put it out there, okay, is that I think most teams, and I've certainly felt this in the HR field, we have a tendency to sort of like get stuck in our ways. And so we have the sense of like, oh, if X problem solve with Y. And so one of the things that I try to do now in my career, having that awareness, is sort of go back to sort of like first principles and try and understand like, what is the thing we're trying to achieve? And have I explored all the different ways possible to achieve the thing? So I'll give like a classic example of like, okay, we need management training and I need 90 minutes of everyone's time 4 times over the next 4 weeks. And then you have your CEO say, I don't freaking think so. I can't give you that much time. People are busy, right? I think that the common response is like, well, if you cared enough, you would make the time, right? As opposed to saying, wait, hang on. Why does it have to be this way? Why do I have to insist on 90 minutes weekly for the next 4 weeks? What is the thing we are trying to achieve? And is there a different way to achieve it? Is there like how many and by the way, like when you're doing that, trying to understand like what are the parameters that you're working with? So if your CEO says no, don't just like, oh, okay, I guess you don't care, you don't value it, but say, no, why? Like, is it a time issue? Is it a money issue? If it's a money issue, what dollar amount would I have to get to in order for you to okay this? Maybe they say there's no dollar amount. Actually, it's not about money, right? Maybe they say, okay, it's 10K. Well, I can work with 10K. Maybe they say I want it, but I want it with $0, right? So then that will start to build the parameters that you can work around versus I have a set thing that I want to do in a way that I want to do it. And if you're going to say no to me, then I guess we're at odds. I think the most succinct way I can say this is making sure that you are approaching with curiosity and truly an innovative mindset, right? Like throw away everything you've done in the past. What is the thing that I'm trying to achieve? and what are all the different ways I could achieve that given the parameters that I have been given, and let's make this work as a partnership versus making it like this us against them. You know, you don't want to do it my way, so clearly you don't value people stuff. I really do think it's about both sides hearing each other and coming to a middle ground.
It also sounds like so much fun. I mean, that's like problem solving right there. You have constraints and it's like, how are you going to navigate that? It's, you know, much more exciting to kind of get all of those inputs and sort of figure out what's going to work. I think also going back to what you mentioned earlier, Melanie, just about like doing things that are easy and that you can see the result for quickly. So kind of testing things out and doing smaller versions of stuff to like
100%.
get inputs before you're like, okay, this is the big change that we're gonna make. Here's the strategy, here's the plan. Now we're gonna like execute, you know, in a very waterfall approach, whereas you were kind of speaking more about like an agile approach.
Yeah, I can even give like a real life example very briefly because I think it's just such a common one. So if anybody else is struggling with this, like the common issue being like the time. I remember at Athena the first time, one of the first big initiatives I took on was rolling out management training. Luckily, I had the buy-in for that, especially because, you know, we're a training company, we buy into training. We're excited about that. But I remember coming in with like typical HR mindset. I'm going to need an entire quarter to map out how I'm going to do this. And when I need to like investigate what problems to solve, and I'm going to need 90-minute sessions each at minimum. And my CEO, Roxanne, she was like, I hear you. I also want to achieve the same thing you want to achieve. And also, you get 2 weeks. You get 2 weeks and you get 1 hour of everyone's time. And that 1 hour can't be added on time. It's got to be time that already exists. And here's the thing, like I could have been, and I saw your response to it because that was my response to it. I was like, Roxanne, do you even know? Do you even know how trainings work? But to her credit, she actually pushed me in a way that I wouldn't have naturally pushed myself, right? And so what we ended up doing was quick tip for anybody who's struggling with getting buy-in on time. What we did was so we now have this philosophy at Athena of replace, don't add. So anytime I want to do a training, I limit it to 1 hour and I replace one of our company-wide meetings. So if we have a weekly town hall, for example, right? Instead of adding an hour, I will cancel one town hall. I'll get buy-in from the team. Which one can we cancel? We're going to cancel this one. I just gave 80% of our employees an hour of extra time, and our managers, they're just going to use the same time that they would have used to sit in town. So I didn't add. And then with the 2 weeks, she said 2 weeks, she didn't say, I want all the trainings to be out in 2 weeks. I want one training at a time to be in 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks, you're going to come up with the next training based on the feedback that you get on that first training you did. And to her credit, she was right. And it was better because I was able to get feedback and adjust throughout the way versus I spent a quarter doing all this stuff and I don't find out till a quarter. Now I've built up expectations for employees and they think it's going to be this big thing and I missed the mark and now I'm screwed because I spent that entire quarter doing this instead of collecting feedback along the way. So that's an example of really partnering with your leadership team to see what the constraints are and find ways to make it work. And it doesn't mean devaluing HR. It doesn't mean not doing the things that you all want to do. It means doing it in a way that is easy for everyone, that is doable, that quickly shows results, and that shows that you are a partner, not just, you know, HR trying to force your way onto people.
I, I love that idea. Just get something out there so people can like that feedback and that loop of getting the iterations through is the best way to grow and learn in business, in anything, and help your business grow as well. Like, it's brilliant. I love that.
Bryce, you mentioned earlier, like understanding the business. I think a lot of what we're talking about is related to that. I guess with Melanie's approach, it's similar, but how do you tackle or approach not making it ancillary, as you mentioned, like when you're thinking about driving that transformation with, if it's a cultural shift, if it's creating psychological safety or a new way of working, a new process?
Yeah, I'm actually so glad you mentioned psychological safety because I think that's a perfect example, mostly because like a non-zero portion of executives think that psychological safety is a bunch of San Francisco, you know, verbiage and kind of freaks them out about what you might be trying to introduce. And the premise, and HBR did really interesting research on this. Psychological safety is basically, if you're in a operating room, does anybody have the freedom and the confidence to tell the surgeon that they're using the wrong tool? Or the concept that Toyota is really famous for, that anybody can stop the assembly line. There's so many great reasons for psychological safety, right? For not coming down on or creating retribution for somebody calling an error of someone senior to them. But you call it psychological safety. And I've worked with executives who are like, I will not hear those two words next to each other. Okay, so sort of to Melanie's point, like, don't talk about the words. Instead of pushing psychological safety, push your desire to support business continuity, to support business growth, to support competitiveness, all of these things which the business drives. From the employee standpoint, they want integrity, they want innovation, and they want inclusion, which is psychological safety. And so I think it's pulling the two together, and versus or, and reminding, so long again as your people initiative, the thing that you are recommending to the business is truly in favor and in support of the success of the business. That's the why. And being really clear that the why isn't just because I'm from San Francisco and I think psychological safety is really great and woke and we should all do it, but it's in support of business continuity. It's in support of competitiveness. It's in support of the organization's goals. And the how is this trust, this agency in the operating room. And I'm also just such a big fan of citing your sources. So it's not this is my idea and I think it's great. It's hey, look, Harvard says it, or I pulled it from this textbook, or look, you see it in practice in Toyota. And so finding other examples in the wild that help illustrate and add a little data to the business to the HR recommendation that's in support of the business's goals helps to underwrite the fact that the change you're creating is for us, is for them, not for me and my own pride.
I think that makes a lot of sense, citing your sources, but also getting external sources like that you can basically curate or summarize insights from similar companies or similar sizes. Obviously, every organization is going to be a little bit different. And the thing with psychological safety too is that the whole point is like they're higher performing teams because of that. And ultimately, that's the thing you're trying to achieve is operational success. Anoop, you've had like a lot of experience with executive leaders, and I think, I'm curious to get, everybody's thoughts really, but like it doesn't necessarily have to be executive leaders, but how have you navigated or gotten leaders to embrace change, especially when there's like resistance to change? Like a lot of times that's the biggest, hardest thing, is just people don't want to do things differently, even if it could be so much better if they did. So
Yeah.
that, like, how do you do that? How do you navigate that? Leaders, managers, I think
Yeah.
you had
There's
a good example about feedback.
yeah. There's a few different ways of doing this. The example of like we've got where we're bringing in different tools and platforms, and that change is happening. We often get those barriers that come up, right? I think it's natural that some people have different ideas, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, I think we've spoken about whys and benefits and speaking to those, but ultimately, what we try and do is make sure that everyone's had their voice. Because I don't know. I'm not saying that I know best, but we have to let everyone speak their voice, and the people will come forth with what they think is best, and focusing in on that why we're driving that change, and saying that this is the reason why we're promoting this is in line with the business benefit, this is in line with your benefits, and ultimately working towards that. So yeah, like a couple of examples. I was working in a healthcare in a hospital for quite a few years in my early career, and quite a lot of the senior management were quite resistant to see I wasn't working in the data and the reporting side of things, and quite resistant to see the live data because they didn't want to know what it was telling them. And we're like, actually, no, you need to see this because this is what your data is telling you about your hospital, and you need to change because of this. The behaviors need to change because of this. I think backing it up with data often helps. So again, citing something, Bryce, just like what you were saying, citing something that's going to support your point, that helps a lot. But then, yeah, I think going through and understanding why they're being resistant, what is it for them that's working against the change that you're trying to bring in, and trying to work around that helps a lot. Like, but that's where I'm working now. We might have had a few challenges, but we also see that as healthy. Challenge is healthy. If I always say when I'm in a meeting, I was like, please, if I'm doing something that you want to challenge, come forward with it and let's have it out. I'd much rather you did that than you didn't actually understand why we're doing this, and you weren't happy with why we're doing it. As I said, we're all people, right? We're here to help support people, and if you look after your people, they'll look after you in the business as well. So yeah, I think benefits, why, and data and support is always good.
I would also add in, and Melanie touched on this a little bit. I call it interrupting a false binary. It sometimes is like my idea or nothing, the thing we're going to do or nothing. And actually, to your point, Anoop, if you bring an idea forward and there's pushback or there's a counter suggestion or there is a revision, data supports, and I'm not citing this because I didn't prepare this fact, that your willingness to show that you're willing to change your mind and you're willing to move off of your ground is also going to encourage them to move forward. And so that openness and that flexibility and your willingness to learn and adapt and be like, okay, cool, we're not doing 90 minutes. Well, let's talk about that. It's not either or, it's somewhere in the middle. And so being ready for that continuum, being able to anticipate that you may not ship 100% of the original plan, but you actually might reach a better outcome by taking into account the other contributions from your stakeholders.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I've worked in both of those extremes where you do get people who are open to that, but then sometimes you work in like, no, this is how you're doing it, and you have to do it this way. And ultimately, it's the people that will suffer, and the people that will think, I don't actually want to work in this environment. It's the culture's not right. It's not where I want to be, and you'll lose the good people when you do that.
I'm going to jump in with, oh, sorry, did I interrupt
I was
somebody?
just gonna say, I love this interrupting false binary. I think that's that's a really good, like
I
we should
know.
just big
I'm gonna
t-shirt
steal
out of
it.
that.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
steal
Yeah,
that one.
I guess I was
Should
gonna
just wear a t-shirt and wear it to all the meetings, just like, hey, everybody.
Yeah.
love it so
Yeah.
much. I'm going to jump in with a possibly controversial statement that I don't actually think is a contradiction to anything that anyone has said here, which is I actually don't think it is the people team's job to drive change at an organization. I think it's our job to help facilitate change at an organization and to make sure that to help coach and advise the leaders so that this is the right change that we want to achieve. What I mean by that is, I think sometimes where people go wrong is that they have like an idea in their head and they're like trying to drive in, trying to shoehorn it and make it happen versus, realizing that like, especially as an HRBP, when you're both an HRBP and a peer, when you try to force your thoughts on your stakeholders, what happens is you start to build resentment. And that relationship starts to degrade, right? Like, oh, I don't want to meet with Melanie. Every time I meet with her, she tries to shove this stuff up down my throat, right? Like, I don't see her as a partner. I see her as a nuisance, right? And anytime, and I do this with my CEO as well, anytime that like we're trying to drive a change, and really it's coming from Roxanne, which is where it should be coming from, is our CEO. Anytime I believe all change should be coming from the CEO. And anytime it comes from the CEO and I'm getting resistance, I actually don't try to force it on someone. At that point, I then like take my advisor role to the CEO and I say, hey, like I'm sensing some resistance. My advice as your head of HR is that it sounds like you probably don't have buy-in yet. I think you have some work to do to get that buy-in from the leadership team. And I'm happy to support and facilitate that and like try and understand where the issues are. But it's not going to work if I'm trying to I'm not their manager. I have no authority over them. And I'm not trying to ruin this relationship whereby they're never going to talk to me again when they have an actual issue because they're just going to see me as a nuisance. This has to come from you. Let me help you figure out how best to do that. So I think everything you all said is true, right? And also, I think, sort of like underpinning all of that needs to be that this is coming from one voice. This is coming from the CEO, and you are just helping make that happen versus creating a dynamic where people think that like, it's HR against the rest of the company. So I'm a big fan of helping facilitate change. I don't think that it's HR's job to drive the change themselves.
I think it's a great insight and also sort of mindset shift, and probably also how HR got into the situation that it's in in many places where people are like, ooh, HR, because there is that disconnect. I think that approach is really strategic and it makes a lot of sense. Anoop, you guys have teams all over the place in different countries. And when we were speaking earlier, you brought up kind of you guys were sort of driving a new approach to feedback. And I think it's really interesting little case study because they're like, how do you basically navigate through cultural differences? And in this case, it's like different countries that each have their own very specific approach to things. So as companies are more global, it's not just that, it's also, within this, in the US, you can have a lot of diversity, of course, but I think like the cultural aspect is really interesting. So can you share a little bit about what your experience has been there and like how you sort of approached getting people that have very, very different perspectives about kind of fundamental things like communication on the same page with how the company wants to kind of approach something.
Yeah, totally. So, as part of bringing Pando in, one of our things was that we wanted to drive a real, honest, constructive feedback culture within our business. That was something that we wanted to do for mutual growth within the entire organization. As I said earlier, we operate across different regions with Germany, UK, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and in the different regions, culturally, feedback is received in very different ways. I know, without meaning offense to anyone, the typical Dutch approach is seen as honest and direct, and that's how they expect to receive it as well. In other regions, it's seen as being, if you're honest and direct in a negative way, that's taken really personally. And people are almost like to the point where it can become a legal issue. So you have to be really like careful with the words you say, and especially like with a platform like Panda, where you're writing things down and giving feedback. We want to encourage that. We want to encourage honest, constructive, polite, professional feedback so that we can all grow together, right? So that was a change that we're trying to bring in. We got heavy resistance from one particular part of the business, one region, and that culture was cited. They were like, well, for us, we don't get this. This is not our way of doing things. And if we were to embrace this platform like this, it would just be, yeah, well done, high five, you've done a great job, and that's it. Nothing constructive, nothing about growth, nothing about helping the individual get to that next level to be able to really, grow as a person in their role. What we've tried to do is run workshops with those individuals to help them come along on that journey. And what I've tried to do is give individuals feedback in the way that I would expect it back and set expectations very clearly with them that we are looking to give feedback for you, and I'm here to help you grow. And that's what we're all responsible for. We're all responsible for each other's growth. We're all responsible for our peers' growth across regions and within our own region. So you give me feedback on how I'm doing. You tell me if I'm doing a good job or if there's areas that I can improve. And for me, I'm actually expecting you to tell me where I can grow. I'd much rather than you say, yeah, Anoop's a great trainer. He done an excellent job on this training course, and left it at that. I'd much rather said, Anoop's a great trainer. He's done a great job on this course. However, I'd really like it if he would ask more questions and got more people involved in the training course. Like a tiny little thing that will just help. Like one of my team had that, was just getting loads of 5 out of 5 ratings, and I'm like, that's great, Simon, but it doesn't let me do anything to help you grow. Where do we go from here? And for me, like learning and growth for people is one of the biggest motivators, and the biggest things that people want in a job is to feel challenged. And if you haven't got that opportunity for growth, I don't think you can have that challenge necessarily. It makes it really difficult. And as a team lead as well, makes it really difficult to have those conversations with that individual. So yeah, we approached those people in that region quite openly and honestly, and we said that this is something that we want to bring in for your benefit. Again, I'm going back round to what we said at the beginning. It's all about the benefit, and they they are coming around. They're getting more and more involved. They are actually now giving feedback, and it's. But I think with them, we had to lay that expectation that if you frame it in this way, where you're expecting honest, constructive, positive, professional, and polite feedback from everyone, then like you can give that and expect it back to you as well. But receive it in the way that you're using it for your growth, not personally. No one's trying to attack you. No one's trying to say that you're rubbish at your job, or no one's trying to say that you're a bad person. It's all for your growth, and see it in that light. And yeah, so far the response has been quite positive, but it hasn't been easy to go through that journey for sure. It's been quite
Yeah.
tough, but
I think it's
yeah.
a shame, like a lot of how we go to school and we don't really get feedback in school, for example, unless you're like a designer or in a creative space where you're, presenting your work and getting feedback on it, just honest feedback. Like there are certain roles that are used to getting feedback, that are comfortable getting feedback, and it's like the behavior change of being okay getting feedback is a big shift. And the cultural difference thing that really, in my career, when it really hit me, when I was prior to Pando, and part of why Pando exists, when I was the CMO at Miro, the company was like, when I joined, it was like a Russian company, like mostly Russian. There was only a couple of people outside of Russia. Luckily, before all of the war situation, I was able to visit, and that was a great experience. But the thing that like really stunned me was that one time I was with my CEO having a conversation, and I was like, oh yeah, great minds think alike. And he was like, yeah, we have the same saying, fools follow each other. I'm like, that is not the same, but it was like, it just hit me like how differently people's contexts of situations are, and also where they're coming from. And all of this, like you see everybody in the team and everybody has their Miro t-shirts on, and like the culture is vibing, but then really like it's so different, and we really have to like navigate all of these unspoken, unarticulated things as well. And that's like, I think a lot of what you all have talked about too, just understanding and uncovering and learning and knowing is such a big part of it. But that was really like, okay,
Yeah.
wow, that's not the same thing to me. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess shifting gears a little bit, I'm curious to get thoughts on sustaining changes. So like you have something happening, I mean, Melanie, you've talked about doing smaller things, iterative things, adapting as you go. How do we sustain these behavior? We're really trying to build new habits, right? So how do we make it a habit, I guess? How do we turn things into habits? And Melanie or Bryce, if either of you want to jump in on that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think the key thing, which I said earlier on, is really to make it easy to implement. And like And that requires sort of building it into the culture, making it very low lift. And so I'll give three examples actually, just so that like people can see like a variety of what this could look like in action. I don't want people to think it's like a one-off thing. So a very real example at Athena early on when I joined, we were all like, we're very big on performance. We're a high talent density culture. We're a big performance culture. Everyone's held accountable to high standards. And as I did some digging, I realized like, oh, well, actually, there are several managers who are having some performance issues, but they've never flagged the issues. And so that doesn't sound to me like we are doing the thing. And so as I dug in, I started realizing like, oh, managers are uncomfortable saying tough things. Managers lack clarity around what is high performance. Because if you're coming from different companies, you're bringing that baggage. Everybody's got different definitions of high performance. How much slack are you willing to cut someone? What does high performance look like at your company? Anyway, long story short, I think a lot of companies will go towards like this 9-box metric, like rubric, and it's like very complex. And we just knew like our managers are not going to take the time to read this thing. If I do this, if I write like this 10-page handbook on like everything you ever need to know about measuring performance, no one's going to read it. So what we actually did was we just came up with 3 questions, and that's it. And we have all our managers ask this of all of their direct reports once a quarter. And if any of your answers are iffy, come talk to me. That's the only ask. I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm not going to require you to fill out a survey to prove that you did it. I'm just going to say the thing, right? It's so low lift that I'm going to trust that you will bring it to me if there's an issue. And I'm going to promise you that I'm not going to fire anyone or push you to fire anyone, because obviously I don't have authority to fire anyone. I'm not going to pressure you to fire anyone based on what you share with me. I'm just going to use it as a conversation starter. And the questions are, if I could go back in time knowing what I know today, would I hire this person again? If this person were to turn in their resignation today, how would I feel? Panicked or relieved? And ultimately, is this person making my job easier or harder? That's it. Just answer those 3 questions for me. I'll remind you once a quarter. And if anybody has an issue or they're feeling iffy, just come talk to me. And when I tell you that for the first time, our manager's like, hey, Melanie, I actually do think I have a question, right? Versus previously, we had been like, if anybody's underperforming, please reach out. No one's going to reach out when you say something like that. No one's going to, because it's scary. They don't know what it means. They don't know how to define it. But those 3 questions were easy. They're memorable, and all our managers know them now. Another example was, we were having employees like get feedback, but they weren't clear on the severity of it. And then, we'd have a tough conversation with them and they'd be like, wait, what? I didn't realize it was so serious. So we started color coding our feedback: yellow, orange, red. Yellow means it's a nice to have. It's a good growth, like it's a flex opportunity, but if you don't do it, no big deal. Orange means if you don't do it, you're not going to get, your job isn't at risk, but you're not going to be able to get a promotion and you're not going to be able to get an increase. So that's the severity level here. Red means danger, danger. If you don't make meaningful action quickly, your job is at risk. You will lose your job, right? And so like these little tiny things, they're memorable, they're easy to implement, and people start to do it. So we actually have our employees, when our managers aren't being clear, the employee will say, hey, I'm feeling nervous now. Is this an orange or a red, right? So now we've built that common language. It's so easy. And then I said I would give you a third one. So let's do a third one. Feedback Fridays. So implementing into the culture. So at Athena, when you start, it's not optional. All new hires are added to a one-on-one with their managers every other week, where the manager and the direct report are required to give each other feedback. Now, to Anoop's point about like, making this sort of like approachable and understanding different cultures and different, needs, I do think it is important to think about from an inclusivity perspective, how do you apply these things in ways that resonate with different types? I think it's important to start by establishing and differentiating between the negotiables and the non-negotiables. Non-negotiable is you must give each other feedback. That's non-negotiable. Negotiable is how you go about doing that. Some people, they know that they don't receive feedback well in the moment. So what they do with their managers is say, can you fill this form out? Can you give me the feedback in writing 24 hours in advance so I can read it and be ready on the day of? Other people are like, no, don't put it in writing. It makes me nervous. Can we just have a live chat about it? And then afterwards you can summarize the discussion, right? Like, no, can we alternate? Like you give me feedback one set of weeks and I'll give you feedback the next, because then I feel like I'm going to be nitpicky and I don't like that. I want to give more meaningful feedback, right? The negotiable is how you do it. The non-negotiable is you must give each other feedback, right? So I think those are just little ways of finding a thing you're trying to achieve, but doing it in a way that's easy, memorable, and really like feeding it. Oh, I'll give one last one because I really like this one, and then I'll stop. Is Managers, classic problem is at their one-on-ones, what do? They treat it as like status updates, right? It's just like check in on what's going on. They don't actually talk about like career or like your happiness and satisfaction. They're not finding these things. And you can shout till the top till you're blue in the face. Managers, please ask these questions. They're gonna forget, right? And so rather than fighting them, right, why not just acknowledge that they're really busy and they can't remember these things? It's a lot of cognitive load. I actually, at the start of every quarter, I just schedule a bunch of Slacks that go out once a week. And every week I send a Slack message to our manager Slack channel, and it's just a new question. And it's not required. It's, hey, if you're looking for a new question to check in with your direct report, consider this one. And it'll be one like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how motivated are you when you come into work every day? And what would it take to get that score 1 point higher, right? Those are little things that I can do that just facilitate that process versus being like, managers, you must be perfect and always remember to say the thing and ask all the questions. Like, they're not going to. So how do I then facilitate that for them?
Love it. Lots of great stuff there. I think the last one is, I like the second part of the question, even though it was just an example, but like the survey and then what's one thing that could get that survey rating higher is a really low barrier way to be like, I'm a manager, I want your feedback. And instead of being like, give me feedback, it's like, yeah, okay, what's one thing we could do to, make you a little bit more motivated or feeling a little bit more empowered or whatever it is. So I think that's a great example. We're coming up on time, but I wanted to get Bryce, your thoughts on any kind of last tactical strategies, or if you have any examples you want to share with the group as well.
Sure.
Starting
There
words of
is,
wisdom.
yeah, there's first of all, there's a really great book called Switch on change management and behavior change that I would have just pulled up and like quoted from this whole session, but I suppose it's good to have some original thought. One of my favorite parts of it is creating a destination postcard, is what they call it. And the destination postcard is, again, change is always hard. Change is always, or maybe often hard. And so when driving change, the destination postcard is creating a vivid and a compelling picture of where you're headed to and what's in it for them, as well as why the difficulty of doing something different is worth it. I would say the first time that we started implementing a feedback tool, I really missed this step. The silver lining is that it led us to Pando, but I was trying to fill some of the need for facilitating feedback. And instead of helping people realize some of the what was in it for them, less of a lift in biannual feedback, easier time determining, to Melanie's point, do we part ways with somebody? Better documentation if we ever need to part ways with somebody. Having a clearer destination of what was in it, and including things like this served SOC 2 compliance. This is ways that you can get feedback from other people around the organization and incorporate it into these conversations instead of having to solicit it on a dime when everybody's doing the same thing. The feedback, the destination postcard, it says it's directing the rider and it's motivating the elephant. And the whole analogy of the book is that decisions are based both on your head and your heart, and you've got to motivate both of them to compel change. So that's probably my biggest takeaway, is really, really do storytelling and help people understand where they're going.
I like that. Anoop, any parting words of wisdom?
I mean, I work in a data consultancy, so I'm going to go back to the data. But for me, the biggest thing the way we've been able to really drive a lot of change is by things we've said before, but tracking KPIs. I'll take Panda for example. So Panda was my project to bring into the business, and one thing, as I said, is we wanted to drive a better feedback culture. But we wanted to make sure we're getting the breadth of feedback. We wanted to get feedback from multiple people, get different voices, get different opinions. So then we've got the best opportunity for growth when an individual is speaking to their team lead. So one of the metrics we put in is that initially we'll work on the quantity of feedback and in terms of how many different voices we're getting. So within a year, we want at least 4 different people giving you feedback, and then we'll look at the the qualitative side of it. Well, what is the sentiment around it, and is it hitting those topics that we said where we want it to be professional and constructive and polite, and we'll work on that as well. But yeah, KPIs. Think about how you can drive that change with some incremental KPIs to get you closer towards your goal. That's where I would start, I think.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. So vision, story, clarity, feedback loops, easy, simple. It sounds like, Melanie, with the last stuff you were talking about, also like flexibility, but really being clear on the stuff that's definitely a non-starter or non-negotiable. There was one question that came up in the chat, so maybe we can answer it quickly, but it's just from Brittany. She was asking about advice on how to sort of navigate a merger when it's a much smaller company getting absorbed into a much bigger company, and wanting to kind of keep elements of the culture and keep things that they have. So how can they influence change, I think, is what she's saying in that kind of context. If anybody has any parting words on that.
I'm happy to jump in, and I'm going to start with like the tough thing, which is your new company is probably not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. I don't think it's your job to try and make this the company for everyone that you hired in. I think it's your job to provide clarity and context so that your employees can make the right decision for them about whether or not this is a place where they would like to continue working. I say that because I think that like the biggest mistake a people team can make is to try and create a company culture that makes everyone happy. I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think your job as a people leader or a people team is to create a culture, the culture that is going to best empower your company to achieve its business goals. And so that means that every company should have a slightly different culture. There is no such thing, in my opinion, as one right culture. It is the culture that you need to achieve X goals. And some cultures might be more X, some cultures might be more Y. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. It means that every company is driving towards different changes. I think you should offer that clarity to your employees and know that you're going to lose some people. You're probably going to lose a lot of people. And actually, that's a good thing to lose them quickly versus having your company slowly bleed and hold on to people who are not happy and who are really bringing down the culture as you try to shift into this new way of being. So that's my personal take and opinion.
I'm going to second that. I think it's okay. As you said, it's okay for people to not get on with that new culture and not get on with the new way of working. That's completely fine. It's not for everyone. And it makes me think of, okay, really, really bad example is the US Office. Is a show that I love. Many, many years ago, watching it. Actually, so the original was a UK one, which was
They're
filmed.
both good.
The UK one is filmed down the road from me. It's
Also,
literally Slough
okay.
is down the road from me.
Now
But
you're just
anyway,
bragging.
I know, right? But yeah, but it's when there's a merger, they bring in the new office, and within like the first 2 or 3 weeks, everyone has left.
Yeah.
Literally everyone, and that's fine. That's normal. And you should expect that to a certain extent. But the ones that stay, it's about for you. It's about, as you say, educating them on how things are done at the new company, educating them, giving them clarity, giving them the opportunity to say, this is something I want to be part of, or this is something I don't want to be part of. Either is fine. Just like forcing them to be part of something when they don't want to, that's not fair. So yeah, I think having that openness and the communication around that is the way forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, all three of you. It was really fun. Thanks for joining. And for everyone else, we've got one more session. We've got a bunch of sessions tomorrow. All the link snafus and shenanigans have been resolved. So we hope to see you then. And everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.